Africa's leverage right now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm speaking to you watching, if you are African, if you're the diaspora, if you're an investor looking into Africa, right now, Africa, I think we have the highest leverage. And Europe has to know what it wants. And when it comes to Africa, make an offer very clear. What do you want from us? And what are you willing to trade? When you engage with Europeans or Americans or even Chinese, that's what the language should be. So you, my fellow European, your company does this, this, and this. What exactly are you gaining from you coming to Kenya to do this business? And that's when you rebuttal and say, okay, in this deal, what would you offer or offer me? What am I getting out of this deal? Ladies and gentlemen, this is not vulgarity. This is not a bad thing. This is how business is done.
Wealth over the last 40, 50 years in this continent. A lot of them, you'll be surprised, don't know what to do with that wealth. We need to interface with them. We need to sit down with them and come up with the kind of conversations and arguments we're having today to get them to devote part of that wealth to driving this continent forward.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Nohemie & Co podcast. Okay, so here's something that I've been thinking about. If China is aggressively building infrastructure in Africa, Americans are now making deals, the Gulf states are investing, it begs the question, what is Europe's leverage or added value to Africa right now? Is Europe in its flop era in colonial relevance? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nohemie & Co podcast. Okay, yes, I'm using my cooking utensil to hold my mic. Sorry, my other microphone sucked. The other episode I was listening to the audio, I was like, I know this podcast is giving budget, but my goodness, the sound just sucks. Anyways, so the reason why I've been thinking about this quite a lot, you guys, I'm in Kenya right now. Tomorrow I'm actually grabbing my flight to Kinshasa. It is so obvious that I think Europeans are starting to lose their edge in Africa. And it's very interesting to watch. And how this came about, recently I was at a conference and it was on semiconductors and the mining sector in Africa. It was happening here in Nairobi. So cool. Like, I love being in the room with a bunch of nerds that are actually doing stuff, not just jabbering. But while we're networking, I had the chance, in between session, I had the chance of speaking to these two Swedish people. So nice. One thing about Swedish culture, love Swedish culture. Like, Swedish people are just nice, calm, the whole Fika brand, I so love it. And so I was talking to them, I was like, hey, like, what do you guys do? And it was quite fascinating. One is a professor, the other one works in a sub-branch of SIDA. SIDA is one of the largest Swedish government aid sort of funding global programs. And so they were talking about this concept of offering customizable academic training. And so how it works is, say that I have my staff in Congo, I reach out to them and I say, hey, I want you to create a curriculum of, say, 1 month where my staff gets to learn project management and artificial intelligence, and they can just like customize some kind of curriculum. My staff goes to Sweden, or the professors, I guess, come to my country of Congo, train my people, I pay them for it, and so on. So this idea of like knowledge transfer. And so then, me being me, I was like, okay, this is nice, but what are we getting out of it and what are you getting out of it? I'm sorry, I'm not the most diplomatic person, but I'm a businesswoman. I'm like, this has to be some kind of exchange. And I come from an academic background and then I went to nonprofit before switching to the private sector. I know that in academia, especially professors, when they're around certain populations, say coming to Africa, or are people going there and exchanging with those professors, it's data. It's what I call intellectual extraction that you're masking as capacity building, which, by the way, those of you listening, are you like, Nohemie, what the heck is capacity building? It's a very non-profit terminology and like international development. The whole idea is that many African countries, the state is not able to meet the demand of the population. So foreign countries, multinational organizations like the UN, the World Bank, they're able to come in and allocate funding, staffing to build the capacity of the economy, of communities, of healthcare. Now, Africa has been a recipient of capacity building for too long, and where is the building being done? Where is the capacity being allocated? We need to see results. Anyways, so for me, this conversation that I had with these guys, it really got me thinking a few things. And this is what I want to talk about in today's podcast. And this topic is important because if you follow my podcast, it's all about building businesses in Africa. It's all about investing in businesses in Africa. So, lesson number one, actually, no, I don't know if this is a lesson or a question. Question number one. I think the era of aid, the era of international development, the era of nonprofit is over. And I think Europe is a bit out of touch. Europe refuses to accept this reality. And when I say Europe, mostly Western Europe, because East and Central Europe, they really don't get involved that much. But Western Europe, I just feel like they're not accepting that the era of international aid, the era of Europeans were going to send missionaries to make up for colonial act, it's over. And I just feel like it's very weird. And I'm like, the solution is actually quite simple. Like, stop moralizing Africa and start offering business deals. Like, Africa, we don't need any more aid. That has not helped us. That has caused enablement from every level of the economy. And right now, what we need is deal flows. And I think we don't need saviors. And Europeans, a lot of time, they need to come into Africa with something to bring to the table, a clear exchange. Stop with the long-winded diplomacy. Love or hate Trump, one thing this man has showed the world right now, that diplomacy is kind of over. The new order is transactional. And so I think the solution really is quite simple. Come to Africa with deal flows, whether that's capital, infrastructure, technology, market, opportunity. And I think if you can't, if you cannot offer that, stop expecting gratitude. I know, I'm very blunt. Lesson or question number two, this one is a hot take. Critical thinking over vocational training. Hear me out. Here's the thing, with AI going the way it is, the reality is vocational training, whether that's electrician maintaining data centers, plumbers, and so on, blue collar jobs, globally are going to become in demand because white collar jobs are being taken over by technology so fast we can't even keep up. And I think when it comes to the African continent, I've always said we need more vocational training. And what a lot of colonial history has done, especially people like guys that are from the Belgium colony, French colonies, these people love office jobs. They are so bureaucratic. They have drank the Kool-Aid of office life, when in reality, that's not what Africa needs. It's still on. And I think that vocational training is so good because it's a short time frame. But what I think is important with vocational training, don't just train people to be plumbers, match them with jobs after they finish their placements. And here's what I think when I say critical thinking over vocational training for now. One thing Europe is actually very good at that they refuse to pass on to the rest of the world is actually critical thinking. I mean, you cannot go in war, historically speaking. You cannot colonize that many nations without being strategic, which is critical thinking. And something that we don't talk about enough with African labor, what it lacks a lot of times is critical thinking. This is what happens when a nation of people are still under a curriculum from Belgium or from colonial era. So the critical thinking lacks. And this is not just a Congo issue. Kenya has the same issue. Abidjan has the same issue. You look at the mass population who makes up the majority, they don't always have the most critical thinking. They're hardworking, but the critical thinking lacks. This is what Europe can bring to the table if you want to talk about knowledge transfer and knowledge exchange, but they won't. And I really think you can train someone to be a plumber, but if they don't know how to have that critical thinking with customers, they don't have the critical thinking, the strategy of taking that plumbing business, that plumbing offering into a full-on business, they're always going to be capped and limited. And I think the solution is very clear. Europe could actually offer something very unique. Access to world-class training, whether that's university but short time frame. We don't need any more 6-year university training, make it shorter. An education, I think, that teaches most young Africans the critical thinking. Not the history of Europe, not the this is how we do it back in England, but more critical thinking training and frameworks, which is a thing. Like my staff in Congo, I've trained them on critical thinking. It was costly because the first 2 years, trust me, they made a lot of mistakes, but I was also strategic as a leader. I was like, if I don't teach my staff how to think critically, long term, it's gonna cost me a lot of money because you're pulling out fires and solving issues that someone who can think critically would resolve in a heartbeat. And this is a training that luckily for me, I got in Canada growing up there, right? So this is something I think Europe could teach. It would be so valuable that some 2,000 euro certificates from some weird training is not valuable to most young Africans. But the critical thinking piece matched with the vocational training, chef's kiss. Lesson number 3, or question number 3. The New World Order, like I said earlier, this one is my favorite. The New World Order, like I said earlier, is about transaction. It's about deals. And here's my thing with Europe. You're either going to adapt to this reality or you're gonna die in this global economic world. What do I mean by the New Order? Let's be honest. The rumor is that now China and other Southern Sphere countries are taking over the world over the United States. When you look at the currency of the yen versus the dollar, when you look at the power of the United States and its influence, I don't know if we're fully there yet. But the idea is that arguing that economically the US is in its flop era, people are trying to move away from the dollar. People don't really source anything from the US, minus some apps here and there. So what does that mean? I think, like I said earlier, economically, the United States being the leading country in the world, its current leadership has been very vocal to the world. Like, we give you guys money in aid, not for free. It was in exchange for soft power. You did not deliver, we're cutting funding. We are going to do a partnership with Congo because in exchange, we want minerals for our defense, for our technologies and AI and so on. China is coming in here in Africa, throwing billions of dollars, not for free. One thing about China, they never use aid language. From day one, they're like, we're gonna give you loans of 100 bajillion years. In exchange, we will build infrastructure where we get to extract and transform and capture the value chain to bring back those things to our country where we have manufacturing. So the New World Order is moving away from too much diplomacy and being very blunt about transaction. And I think this translates to business relationships, right? And I think this is something that many European individuals, institutions, companies, they seem to not want to accept this reality. If you ever engage in a conversation with many Europeans, they are too diplomatic, almost to a point where it's long-winded. Again, I'm very impatient, so when you talk to me, you gotta get to the point, which I need to work on that. But when I feel like I'm engaging with you, you're doing this to get to the point, when in reality, in the end, we both know in this conversation, we wanna make a deal and both make money. So why not just start with that, right? So I think this is where Europe needs to stop sugarcoating things and just needs to be direct in its language. Everyone wants to make money. Within the first 2 seconds of engaging, your audience has to know what do they gain from utilizing your service, from utilizing your institution, and you need to be honest and transparent in your language of what you get out of that person. Not mask it as aid, because that just makes you look like you're not gonna make any money, but being brutally honest where you are capitalizing in this exchange, and that's okay. That's business. And why is that bad? And I really think the solution is very simple. If Europe wants to compete in Africa, it needs to lead with deals, not diplomacy. And I really think that the deals can look like infrastructure, investment, market access, technology transfer. These are things that Europe still has, but they're not offering it when they engage with Africans. And this is my solution to Europe. Number 4, lesson number 4, and I will close with this one. Africa's leverage right now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm speaking to you watching, if you are African, if you're the diaspora, if you're an investor looking into Africa, right now, Africa, I think we have the highest leverage, and I will explain why. As a continent, we are the last frontier. We hold some of the world's largest natural resources that the world needs and can no longer live without, but we have barely tapped into it. We do not have as much of the infrastructure to really industrialize it. What does that mean? Africa, I feel as a continent, has become like a la carte. A la carte is a beautiful restaurant where you go, the menu's wide open, you get to pick what you want. Let's be honest. I'm just gonna give you guys some high-end ideas and numbers here. In DRC, security, northern side, Russia. Katanga, minerals area, China has been in the game for decades now. The US is just stepping in today. Although I've always felt like the US play could actually be energy. The US should have focused on targeting the energy sector of DRC, especially hydropower, given how much water we have. But they want minerals because of AI and defense. And what part of it, the DRC? Other parts of the DRC, parts like Lubumbashi, the Chinese are there. Some part Luanda border with Angola. We're seeing other parts of Africa tapping in. So I'm using Congo as an example of a menu. Everybody is pulling into Africa what they want to leverage on. And so Europe has to know what it wants. And when it comes to Africa, make an offer very clear. And as Africans, my fellow Africans, we also need to learn the language of negotiation, articulating, signaling what exactly we want from this deal flow. And it's very simple. You come in and you say, the US is doing this, China is doing that. So you, my fellow European, your company does this, this, and this. What exactly are you gaining from you coming to Kenya to do this business? And that's when you rebuttal and say, okay, in this deal, what would you offer or offer me? What am I getting out of this deal? Ladies and gentlemen, this is not vulgarity. This is not a bad thing. This is how business is done. And this is where Europe needs to move forward. And I really, really think the solution is very clear. Africans, we need to learn to ask harder questions. We need to learn to ask harder questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not understand this docile behavior that we have of sugarcoating things. Where does that get us? And just to be clear, asking harder questions does not make you rude, it does not make you entitled. Actually, entitlement is valid because it's our continent, but it just makes you strategic. And that's what people respect at the end of the day. Not what can you give us per se, but what do you want from us and what are you willing to trade? When you engage with Europeans or Americans or even Chinese, that's what the language should be. And that language, ladies and gentlemen, is the new order. Let's stop with the fluff. Let's stop with the sugarcoating. Let's make deals. And I think in closing, I just want to clarify here. Let's just be clear. This is not about Europe is evil. Europe, the colonizers, they deserve what's happening to their economy. You guys, no. If you got anything from my channel is about business in Africa. How do we build businesses in the continent? My thing with this episode, and I want you to walk away from, is this. I don't want to say that Europe is irrelevant per se, but I feel that Europe as a continent is really behind. And right now, the way the world is moving, especially Africa, if Europeans refuse to catch up, rather than playing the social science gods, they need to move towards being strategic business people that are offering us deals when they come to Africa. Because what are you going to do about this new order as a continent? And this is even at the individual level. For those of you watching that are members of the diaspora, that are investors, this is also for you a hard reality check. You are in a continent that has trained you, taught you to be overly diplomatic or passive. And now you tap into the African continent, you're realizing when people hear Europe, their interest is money. Because they're looking at you like, you're coming from a Western economy, you should be bringing us the capital. You should be bringing us something. We should not be paying you for whatever you're offering. So coming into the continent with that leverage and that language will go a long way. Anyways, that was my rant. The conference was fun. Anyways, I'm gonna go now to a coffee shop and then go to China market, pick up some dumplings, and then read a book. Make sure to subscribe.